Hello everybody, this is Billy with eMaint. In today's presentation, we're going to be showing you the latest version enhancements and bug fixes for version 11.4.0. So just to let everybody know about today's presentation, I'm going to give you some housekeeping items before we start. Just know that today's session will be recorded and it will be available for you to watch after this presentation is over. So if you need to kind of reference any of the new features or kind of get like a secondary glance at it, you could watch it at any time. Your phones and or microphones will be muted during today's session, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to fill them out in the questions box. I'll go ahead and answer them at the end of this session when we do some questions and answers. So at the end of this as well, we will be providing you a survey at the end of this workshop just to get some feedback and topic suggestions from you on what you want to start seeing more in these workshops. So we're going to jump right in and take a look at some of the new features that are available. As you can see here, we have 4 new features available in this version release. And the very first one we have here is user access control for inventory locations. So if you are a user of the eMaint system that uses eMaint with multi-inventory locations, so you might be charging a part at more than one location, this is going to give you more control over what locations your user can access. You can define for those users what their default location is when they're charging out parts, and you can also define on those users what locations they have access to when they're charging out parts in the system. So for example, if you have a location you don't want a user to be able to charge out for, these controls give you that ability to do that. The next feature we've added is permanent filter tracking. So in the eMaint X4 system, you have the ability to apply permanent filters. An example of this is you might have a user in your eMaint system that has full access to X4, but they should only see work orders in the system that are currently assigned to them. Or maybe you have assets that are located at a specific site, and you want those users to only see the assets at that site. So before, you could go into the eMaint system and you could apply those permanent filters in the system. But it was pretty hard to track what permanent filters they had because we didn't have anywhere in the system that you could actually see that. We've now added a section in eMaint that lets you on a per user basis see exactly what filters are being applied to those users. The third option that we have now added is condition monitoring text value boundaries. So with the condition monitoring module in the eMaint system, you have the ability to set up monitoring points that allow you, based on thresholds being exceeded on a lower bound or an upper bound exception, that you could have a work order and or an email send out based on those exceptions occurring. But before, we couldn't have text fields actually trigger those specific boundaries. Now we've added text-bound boundaries. So for example, you could have a text field where if you enter in the word fail when you enter in text, you could have that be stated as a failed condition monitoring reading. And you can have a work order or an email generate based on those properties. And I'll show you how we can set that up during this session. The last new feature that we've added is mobile charges menu options. So what we've done is more or less on a work order in mobile, when you're looking at the charges panel, we've made it a little bit easier for the users to add part charges, add labor charges, or add miscellaneous charges in the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you where in mobile this has been updated to show you that this process is now expedited to be done a little bit quicker in our system. We also have 7 bug fixes that we've applied in this patch. And the first one we have here is mobile date display issue. So there was some issues with the dates not rendering correctly when you were picking specific formats in the mobile interface when you were closing out work orders. And this was causing some users problems when trying to close out work orders in mobile. So we've gone ahead and fixed that bug. The second one we have here is records per page saving. So there is a specific bug that if you had a report on your dashboard that, let's say you were looking at 50 records and you wanted to see 100 records per page on the dashboard report. Before, if you changed it to 100, for example, you'd leave the page and return to the dashboard, it would revert back to 50, and it would not save how many records you're looking at. This fix goes ahead and it stops the reverting from happening, so whatever you said is the amount of records you should see, that state will be preserved when you go back to that dashboard. The third one we have here is widget column fix. So in your dashboards, you have the ability to make your widgets wider, all your dashboards wider, taller, so on and so forth. But before, you could adjust that, but when you would leave the dashboard and go back, those properties would not be saved. This fix has been applied so that way it will remain the exact same size whenever you leave the dashboard and return to it. So that way it makes sure that your dashboards look just like they were before you left. The next one we have here is mobile parts issue error. So there was an issue that whenever you're trying to issue out parts in mobile and there is a double quotation within the item description, that was actually causing the description to get cut off when you're making a charge on the items. So we've gone ahead and applied a fix to make sure that the whole item description gets converted over when making that charge in mobile. The next one we have is invalid date list viewing error. So this is an error we've seen a lot of people have, that whenever you're trying to filter by a date field, if you're entering in an invalid date value in the field, like bad formatting or whatnot, it was actually causing some users issues that when they applied it, it was actually making their entire list view go away, and they would have to reset essentially their widget state to get it back to where it was before. We've corrected the issue that if you type in a value that's in incorrect format or an incorrect value, that nothing actually gets filtered at all. It will not allow you or accept it unless it's the proper date value that's listed in the actual account settings. So this way it will stop that error from occurring. We've also fixed an issue with related tables and their sorting. So one prime example of this would be like on work procedures. You might have work procedures numbered 1 through 20. But there's always the possibility that number 15 wasn't actually the 15th procedure created. You might have actually gone ahead and added it in the past or after you've created them, but you want it to be the 15th step. The problem is because of the IDs, it would probably go 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 15. So you have had the ability to sort by the column number field, so that way you could fix it. But whenever you left that table, you went somewhere else in the system and went back, that sorting would disappear. So what this is going to let you do is retain the sorting you had before to make sure that you're always sorting by the previous field you were sorting by. It helps retain that state. And then the last issue that we fixed was additional PO costs distributed correctly. So when you're actually receiving purchase orders in eMaint X4, you have the ability to do some weighted costs, weighted quantities, and different values like that when you're actually receiving the purchase order. So what we noticed is that the numbers that were being calculated specifically in X4 were incorrect. So we've gone ahead and made sure that the numbers were calculating correctly from now on. So that goes over all the bug fixes that we've done in this version. So we're going to move away from this slide that we have here, and we're going to go in the eMaint system, and we're going to show you those 4 new features that we have available. So the very first one is user access for inventory locations. So an example of this is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how you can activate in your account the ability to assign user access for inventory locations. So what you're going to have to do is click your name in the top left-hand corner, and that's going to open up our tile menu. Once you open up the tile menu, you're going to pick the third option here for account settings. And just note, you do have to be the administrator of the account to do this, or you're not going to have access rights to turn this on. But what you'll do is you'll head over here to Inventory Control Settings, and a new option down here has been created to define user access for inventory locations. Just to let you know, by default in the account, this setting is turned off. So if you want to use this setting, you'll have to go onto here and turn it on to allow yourself to have the ability to define user access. By default, all users, as long as they can charge out parts, will have access to all locations. But if you want to start restricting locations, you can do it from here. So once you turn this feature on, this is actually not the section where you apply what locations that user has access to. So we're going to go back real quick, and we are going to go to user administration. So we'll go to the main menu here in the top right-hand corner. We'll go to administration, and we'll go to user administration. So what you could do is, for example, I have a user here called Ronald Sanders, and I want to go ahead and I want to modify what locations this user should have access to. So if I go ahead and I click on Ronald's name right here, if I scroll down to the bottom, once you've checked that option, you're going to have this new section here for user location assignment. So you can see here, these are all the locations that are available within your account. So you can see I have 4 inventory locations for main, A1, B1, and C1. And I've also defined for this user that their default location would be A1. What that means is if you're trying to make a charge in your system, such as you're trying to charge out a part to a work order, you're trying to make an adjustment on that part, any way that you're taking inventory out of the eMaint system, maybe charges, adjustments, or even purchasing, that's the default location that's going to be applied for that user. but they will also have a drop down that will show them all the locations that they have access to. So if you have A1 and B1 checked, those are the only two locations those users will have the ability to charge out into the system. So it's a good way for you as the user in the eMaint system to lock down what locations those users have access to. So that kind of more or less goes over some of those user access controls that I mentioned in X4. The second one we have is permanent filter tracking. So you could actually see right below user location assignments, we've added another permission in user administration called permanent filters. So if you want to see a specific user's permanent filters that have been applied in the account, you can go right here and you can see based on the table name here, you can even add a filter name if you'd like to, you can see exactly what type of filter they have applied. So if I'm logged in as Ronald, for example, and I'm looking at the work orders, the only work orders I have access to because of the permanent filters is I can only look at work orders where Ronald Sanders' name is in the assigned to field. So this way you would only see work orders that are specifically assigned to Ronald. Or you could use other criteria if you'd like to. Another example of that is assets. You might have a few users that have multiple sites in your eMaint system. So you might have, in this account's example, I have Ronald in a site called Morrisville, and I have my other user in a site called Johnson City. So what you would see here is I have a permanent filter where the site starts with the word Morrisville, and if I actually go back to my list real quick, we're going to go take a look at Doug Perez over here, and I'm going to click on that user's rights. You're going to see for Doug here, you're going to see that he can only see work orders where the assigned to contains his name, and the site starts with Johnson City. So that way, those are the only records that they can access in the system for those tables. And then you can also see here, if you're someone who's utilizing multi-locations in your account, if you haven't set up anything for that user on a multi-location account, you'll see here that the default accessible location will always be the main location or your primary default, and the default location will go to that location. So you would have to go in and edit those rights to pick which location will be their default, as well as choose which locations that user will have access to. Now, just to show everybody how you can actually apply a permanent filter in the system, what you can do is you can go to your list view here to see all the different records that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the assigned to field to my list view real quick. And one of the things I might want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I want to apply a filter for the assigned to field. So you can see here we have Doug Perez. So if I want to apply a filter for Doug Perez where he can only see open work orders assigned to them because maybe he doesn't care to look at historical records, he just needs to see what work orders are open, you can go to the filter right here where it says eMaint is Doug Perez, and I could put Doug Perez in the filter here. And I'm going to make sure it contains that value so I find any work orders that are assigned to Doug. And I'm also going to filter by the open history field is set to O. So you would go ahead as a user in the system, apply the filter you would want to apply to a user. So this way Doug will always only see work orders assigned to him that are currently open. And if you go to the little filter icon up here to manage filter, your last option right here is save as permanent filter. And this is how you create a permanent filter in eMaint. We've actually gone ahead and enhanced this screen specifically for this enhancement to give you a better idea of what the filters should be for each of these users. So before, when you looked at the screen, the only thing you would see is the username here and nothing else. So we've also added, when you're on this screen, you could see what their first and last name is that's been applied to that user. And if they already have a filter applied to that username, you could see it here as well. So you can see right now that we have Doug Perez set up, that the assigned to contains Doug Perez. So if I want to apply this current filter that I've applied, I could go ahead and hit the plus button next to Doug Perez and apply this change. And that's going to go ahead and apply this permanent filter. So if Doug logged into the system, when he's looking for his work orders, he'll only see the 44 that are currently filtered in his system, no matter what filter he puts in, at least by default. He can go in and set up other filters, but those two filters are permanently in his username unless someone who has the rights goes ahead and blanks it out. And an example of blanking that out would be if we go back to save as permanent filter, you can see that we've now applied that permanent filter and it's been applied to Doug Perez. But what if I want to blank the filter for Doug? So let's say, for example, hey, I don't want to actually have any permanent filters for this user. I want to blank out all those filters so they can access all the work orders in the system. If you check the blank option up here, you can go over here to Doug Perez and apply that change, and that will actually go ahead and clear all the filters for that user. Or one other thing you could do is if you as a user have saved filters, so you know that in the eMaint system you could actually go ahead and save a filter for users to use. You can actually apply a pre-saved filter in your account and make it a user's permanent filter. So that's another way that you can apply the filters in the system. So if I go ahead and I blank out Doug Perez there, he will now no longer have any permanent filters applied to him on the work order table, and now he can access all the work orders in the system. So this is just me showing you some of the enhanced filtering capabilities that we've added, as well as to give you an insight, if you've never done it before, how you can apply a permanent filter in the account, as long as you have the user rights to apply them. So the third feature that we've added is condition monitoring text value boundaries. So if you want to go ahead and create a condition monitoring point that utilizes a text field that can cause an exception, what you're going to do is I'm going to show you real quick one of the monitoring points that I have. So I'm going to go to my list, and I've created a specific field monitoring point called rubber inspection. So let's go take a look at this field. What you're going to do if you want to set up a field to use a text value for exceptions is you're going to utilize either the lower bound or the upper bound formula field. It doesn't matter which one you use, you could use either or. What you're going to do is on one of these condition monitoring points, I've gone ahead and I've set up that the lower bound is going to be set up to have a trigger. So if we hit some type of exception, that a work order will be created as well as an email will trigger. The field itself will have this little red background color, just show that it's failed. And then the text that will be created on the actual work order that gets created will be here on the lower bound text, such as the wear on the tires beyond an acceptable threshold. Please review all tires and determine if we need to replace all tires or just a few. So it shows us the information on, because this failed, this is what needs to be done. So if you actually want to go ahead and use, let's say, for example, the word fail to trigger a condition monitoring failure, what you can do is in lower bound formulas here, you would actually go ahead and within the double quotation, so double quote, the word fail, another double quote, this actually determines if this field will pass or fail. So what I've done is on this field right here, I have it set up that I have a drop down for the words pass and fail. So this way the user has to go in and they have to enter, does this specifically pass or does this fail? If we put in pass, everything will work good. If we put in fail, we'll trigger an exception to occur. So what we can do is if we go to condition monitoring up on the top, we can go ahead and add a brand new reading. And I can go up here to condition monitoring classes and pick my class called tire inspection to enter in my reading. I'll go ahead and put in my initials in the technician's initials box, and then I will proceed, and I will now see all the assets attached to this condition monitoring point. So I can go ahead and fill this in as I need to, and then as I click on the rubber inspection, if I pick the word pass, it'll work fine. If I pick the word fail and I click away from it, you'll see that it's now showing that this is a failed reading, and it will show that the wear on the tire is beyond an acceptable threshold. Please review all tires and determine if we need to replace all tires or just a few. And then you could add some additional comments. So an example of this could be need to replace all tires, or some other information you might put in there. We can go ahead and check the box to save that reading, and then we'll go ahead and hit Save Readings. You'll see that we've now saved that condition monitoring reading in our system. And if we actually head to the list view of all of our work orders, you'll see that a work order has been created based on a text value failing. And then you can go here and see that the brief description was this was created based on a monitoring exception. And then you can see the work description here is our text that we put into the lower bound values. So it's just another way in condition monitoring where you don't have to use numbers in the software anymore to trigger a work order exception. You do have the capability now to use text values to make that occur. So the last feature we're going to show in today's session is the mobile charges menu options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you eMaint MX Mobile. So with eMaint MX Mobile, if I go into here and if we access a work order, so I'll go to the menu on top, we'll pick work orders up here, and I'm going to take a look at my work orders. So I'm going to take a look at all the open work orders in my account. I'm going to go ahead and pick the third one right here for the open CM work order for diesel engine. And when you open up the menu up here, what we've added is on the charges panel, Before you had to click on charges to get to the next screen to add parts, labor, miscellaneous, or even view those charges, but we've now actually added all those options here on the side. So this gives you the ability, if the users want to add a part charge or add a labor charge, we're reducing a few clicks in the system to allow you to do that. So if you need to go ahead and make a labor charge, you can go ahead and hit add labor here. You can go ahead and you can see that it automatically fills in the user's contact ID that's logged in. I can type in the quantity of hours I have here, hit process, and I've now successfully created a labor charge on my specific work order. So it's a quick way to help expedite that process to fill in some information. So that's it for today's presentation. Thank you everybody for coming. Before I end the session and we move to Q&A, I just want to show everybody some of our upcoming events that we have. So some of the upcoming webinars that we have that are workshops are on Wednesday, October 25th, so a few weeks from now, we're going to be showing off projects and Gantt charts in the eMaint X4 software. This is going to be on Wednesday, October 25th at 11 a.m., and William Walters will be doing that presentation. We'll also be doing a best practices webinar on data integrations as well as work mobility, and that's going to be done a week before that on October 18th on Wednesday at 11 a.m. by David O'Reilly, who's the CEO of SHAD. And we also, for anybody that isn't aware, we do have new user training webinars every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's really good for a user who's never used the eMaint system before. You'd be able to go into eMaint and then you'd be able to see some of the basics, such as basic navigation, how to create an asset, how to create a contact, and how to create a work order. And then some of our upcoming boot camps that we have work management PMs that are actually coming up pretty soon. We got one in November. We do have reporting and dashboards in December, and we do have an inventory one actually coming up in 2 weeks if you want to know more about inventory and purchasing. And then we do have another boot camp in December. But the biggest event of the year is coming up very soon. We're only about a month away from it. It's Accelerate 17. So this is eMaint's annual eMaint User and Training Conference that we're having in the Sanibel Harbor Marriott Resort in Fort Myers, Florida. And this is going to be from November 7th to the 9th. So this is going to teach you about all the latest innovations in maintenance technology. You're going to get training on all the new features that are coming out in the latest version of eMaint. We're going to show, it's going to give you some networking opportunities. So one of the really nice things about this conference is the ability to see multiple users that are with the eMaint system. We're going to have hundreds of people here that you can network with that might actually be able to be useful to help you see what they do in the eMaint system and see that's actually a great idea and it's something that you as a user could apply to your system. We'll also have different training that will be available to you. Our support team will be there live, so if you have any problems with your account or any questions that you have, just feel free to contact our support team right there and then, and they'll be glad to help you out, as well as see some of the latest hardware technology that's coming out. All right, everybody, thank you for coming. I'm going to start the Q&A session now.